Chomsky's on the record as saying that the 9/11 conspiracy theory couldn't possibly have happened or be true because it would simply have taken too many people to orchestrate, and by now somebody would have, blown the lid on it, as it were. Is that an idea that you subscribe to?
Well, yeah, that's effectively my problem with it. I mean, he does present a very interesting case, this guy, but I mean, again, this is what I kind of said before. I mean, these are very heavily populated areas and very and a group of buildings that employ an awful lot of people. And then you also have to include the government agencies that would have to be involved, or even just the private corporations if you're going to take the line that it's for some sort of extravagant insurance fraud, like they seem to be suggesting before with that guy taking out insurance on the buildings. Mind you,
the shareholder Larry Silverstein.
Yeah, but mind you, I assume that when you buy a building, you probably do take out insurance on it.
I think people have a problem with the timing. I believe he took out a multi-billion-dollar insurance claim a week prior, which I guess in terms of the timeline seems a bit strange.
Yeah, well, perhaps, but I mean, again, putting that into a wider data frame, like, I mean, if you were to look at every building in New York, I mean, would it be that out of the ordinary? I mean, again, it's something that, without knowing, it's very hard for me to say. But.
Yeah, fair enough, Dan. Look, I guess as well on that fateful day in September, we almost forget that the Pentagon was also attacked and another plane crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. I think one of the reasons we don't have a tendency to think about that as much, although it was obviously a big deal, is because the images aren't seared into our memories like New York was, because obviously it was a very visual thing for people. I guess that makes people question the events there as well. What are your thoughts on the government's decision to remove all cameras near the Pentagon crash site? And stranger still, they've only ever released a very short image snapshot of the explosion, which doesn't clearly show a plane crashing into the Pentagon.
Actually, as far as I remember looking at the debunker movement, that's not true. That latter point, at least. There's a whole lot of photographic evidence around the planes. Like a lot of these claims made by the truth movement are actually just flat out false. You can pull up sites. It's been a long time since I've seen them, but I remember they pulled through a lot of one of the big claims for the Pentagon was that there was no wreckage of the plane nearby the Pentagon. There was just this clean hole, and as it turns out, that was all nonsense. There was a whole lot of photographs of plane wreckage around the site, and you can find all of that if you look at the debunker movements that counter all of that. So that was my one memory of it. As for removing all the cameras, that doesn't really surprise me. The U.S. intelligence and defense authorities are notoriously paranoid. In terms of the timing of it, did it happen before or after? I can't even remember. Like, is this something that they...
the cameras were removed after.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. If it happened before, then it would be really sus. But, happening afterwards, they've just been...
Then attacked. I think the truth movement might have some more ammunition.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Again, this has been a long time since I've looked at this stuff. But, I do think that when you've just had, 2 attacks, probably removing cameras, worrying about, where it's coming from. I mean, they might have assumed that it was, from a more developed, actor, and they might not have assumed necessarily that it was a non-state actor initially. They could well have assumed, they spent the 90s trumping up the Chinese as the next major threat. They could have assumed all kinds of things, wouldn't have made any sense for the Chinese to attack them, but... you never know what they could have been thinking. They could have had everything on the table, and they thought, well, we can't have anyone hack us. Just cut the fucking cameras.
Yeah, I guess just on that, I've had a look around, and I haven't seen any conclusive video or images. Although I guess towards the end of this interview, just for the purposes of the debate, we'll certainly give you the opportunity to find some, because I'd love to see some of images of a plane in the Pentagon crash. I've seen plenty. I completely agree with you in regards to the wreckage. I've seen plenty of photos where it's quite obvious that there's been a plane there. But I haven't seen any video or photos of that event, which it might have been the case that it certainly wasn't captured. But I guess, do you think this goes towards the government's inability, I guess, to dispel rumours of conspiracy? I mean, you'd think that if a simple image could satisfy people's curiosities, then releasing an image of a plane crashing or anything if they're available, and you're saying that they are, and that would probably answer that question. But it would help to diminish the doubt, I guess. The truth movement holds the argument that this sounds a bit outlandish, that a missile was actually the most likely pundit fired in the Pentagon attack, and that a plane could not have pierced the multiple reinforced concrete walls, although this is probably, I'd say, dubious science. But how do you respond to claims of that nature, I guess?
Yeah, I think someone would have seen a missile. I mean, like, they may not have captured, an aeroplane, but, a missile flying toward the Pentagon, that probably would have shown up on somebody's radar somewhere. I mean, those things are fairly conspicuous in of themselves. They do fly at supersonic speeds, but I also think a missile would have done a shitload more damage. The payloads on those things, they would have had to make it very small. But in terms of...
So basically, you don't subscribe to it at all?
No, I don't.
But just addressing that first point, though, do you think the government has demonstrated a certain inertia in able to dispel these rumours, or is it just they're going through their normal procedures and that's the case?
What I was about to say, actually, on that front, I actually disagree with what you just said in terms of, the government has an inability to dispel rumours. I mean, when you look at it, yeah, this movement has obviously, got a few, notable followers and is persisting, but in the same way the Diana conspiracy still persists today.
That's true, but is it growing at the same rate as this one?
Well, I mean, is this one growing? I mean, how often do you hear about it anymore, really? I mean, I actually question that. I mean, what substantial data is there to suggest that, people are still talking about this? Because I don't hear about it an awful lot.
Yeah, I guess it's more of a groundswell online. It seems to just be almost an enterprise in itself.
Yeah.
And I guess initially, in the ways the hearts and minds were very much in an anti-terrorist mode, and now, as time's gone on, people are sort of questioning the event and looking at it in different ways. So I certainly think that online, it seems to be sort of growing in support.
I actually feel as if since the Bush administration left office, the interest has waned a fair bit. I mean, it may be still firing online, but again, that's one of those things I think that online represents people with this sort of niche opportunity to just follow whatever they want, and it doesn't necessarily make it mainstream. And it's the same a little bit. I mean, not to be too pejorative here, but it's like how no one can seem to satisfy the birther movement in the United States. No one will accept that Barack Obama was actually born in Hawaii, not Kenya. Even in spite of why did it take him so long to release his birth certificate? Why is this? Why is that? And so he releases it, and puts it out of the public record, and then they start having people, overlooking and, arguing that, a pixel to the left is just not in the right spot, and therefore, what I'm getting at is that when it comes to conspiracy theories, and when it comes to people's feelings about the government on issues like this, I don't think there will necessarily be enough evidence. It's the same as it's a little bit like fundamentalist Christians who deny evolution. They'll always point to missing links in the primate chain. There's not a link between Australopithecus and Homo sapiens or whatever. But then they find that link, and then where's the link between that one? It's you sort of, so
your perennial hole picker.
Yeah. It's the what do they call it? I mean, the science faith-based version of this is called the God of the Gaps argument. And this is effectively the same thing. There's always going to be some piece of evidence that they'll argue isn't there, and we just don't have complete data. You can't ask that.
Yeah, that's right. I guess that's true of any investigation. There are always going to be knowledge gaps. But I guess moving away from the technical nitty-gritty of the conspiracy argument, Dan, I guess on a more macro political level, do you think 9/11 as an event, not necessarily an orchestrated one by the US government, but does it prove to be a helpful tool of persuasion in instigating, for instance, the Afghanistan invasion and, of course, the war in Iraq?
Well, first of all, I think the Afghanistan invasion didn't really do an awful lot. I mean, it was one of those wars that,
I guess the reference there is more about instigating rather than its effectiveness.
Oh, yeah, no, well, I mean, instigating, but again, the attack on Afghanistan was almost a knee-jerk reaction. These guys were trained in Afghanistan and so on and so forth. But there's an awful lot of stuff there that, suggests that actually the US wasn't really all that interested in Afghanistan to begin with. It was just one of those wars. That they got involved with. The Taliban, obviously a horrible regime. But this is something that a lot of people don't know. And I remember, when I was in Canberra studying a lot of this stuff, we actually had, a couple of Intel representatives from the Australian intelligence services. And he was explaining that the